Captain Kronos, Vampire Hunter. This is my chosen movie review for today. I had seen this about a month or two before, but I decided to rewatch it tonight, and I had so much fun with it the second time. I'm going to babble about it for a little bit. This is a very good movie. I'm going to be honest, I'm not going to bother with who plays in it because I don't really know them. I'm not old enough to remember them. This was, about 10, 15 years before I was brought into this world. But this movie is a lot of fun. It was made back in '74, so, there's a lot of good stuff. And it was made by Hammer too. Which, here's the thing that vexes me. I love Hammer movies, particularly 5 of them. Well, I don't say that I love the rest of them, though. I'll get to this story in a minute, but before I do this, please indulge me to share a history lesson of my experience with Hammer and basically how I feel about them in general. Hammer was this movie studio that was started up in the late 50s, and they made movies on up to the mid-70s, remaking a lot of the iconic horror movies that Universal had done before, but they had to put some twists on them just so they could, differentiate themselves and not just be carbon copies. Which, also I have to address at the same time. We complain about remakes. I've certainly been guilty of it myself, but I've had some out there that have actually been better than what I thought. And remakes are not exactly a new concept. I may take another video to actually talk about remakes in general and how they've always been there, but that's another matter. But basically, Hammer, which is best well known for the Dracula movies that Christopher Lee did, very iconic. They kind of brought back the two horror movies at their time. Introduced a little bit of blood, cleavage, Technicolor, and really good stuff. Here's the thing with them, though. They haven't aged well to me. Not all of them, at least, anyways. I have 5 movies I like by Hammer that I think are spot-on perfect. Horror of Dracula, Curse of Frankenstein, Captain Kronos, Vampire Hunter, The Devil Rides Out, which I highly, highly recommend because you actually get to see Christopher Lee play as a good guy. And I take that back. There's actually 4 Hammer movies I'm thinking of that are spot-on perfect. But this movie is just a lot of fun. It turns the vampires on its head. Now, while I say this, I checked Wikipedia's page. Since this is a Hammer-made movie, it's not listed with a lot of their other stuff, which I think is kind of sad. I think it's one of their best works. The thing about the other Hammer movies, they have a lot of them. Including the 4 that I liked, I've seen maybe 20 of them. And those other 20 range in between okay to piles of shit. The problem with a lot of those movies is that, especially with the Frankenstein and the Dracula movies, they spend way too much time building up character stuff that's kind of pointless. And a lot of the good stuff doesn't really happen until the end of the movie. Case in point, I'm thinking of Curse of the Werewolf, which is the biggest pile of shit that I've seen come out of there. But while a lot of those movies did kind of dance around with stuff, this one wastes no time in getting down to the story. Now, actually, for the story. So we got this guy named Captain Kronos, who is a vampire hunter and is armed to the teeth with different types of swords. He's a silent, only speaks when he thinks it's worth it, badass who meditates and sword fights and kills vampires. He has kind of a tragic backstory which is given out, and sitting there and kind of looking at him, I'm kind of reminded of Kevin Sorbo from Hercules in some ways, except that Kronos is dressed up as a swashbuckling pretty boy. He has an assistant with him named Professor Gross, who is a hunchback, very funny character. And we also have Carla, who is a young gypsy girl who becomes the love interest of Kronos for this movie, and by love interest I mean the girl that he's sleeping with throughout the course of this movie. The story in this is that there's this black shrouded figure who is a vampire who's going around killing young girls in town. A lot of the typical Hammer movies had, a lot of the stuff stakes through the heart, sunlight turns vampires into crispy critters, can't cross running water, crosses work on them, that type of stuff. This, on the other hand, very much turns the vampires in the Hammer franchise on its head. This vampire in particular can walk in sunlight. He doesn't bite on the neck, he actually bites on the mouth. And instead of draining blood, he drains the victims of youth. And there's actually quite a few twists concerning the vampires in this movie. And there's especially humorous, or darkly humorous, I will say black humorous type of scene that takes place in the middle of this movie where they find one of the vampires and they try different ways of staking them. And there's even this really cool conversation between Kronos and the guy who hires him about different types of vampires out there. And Kronos doesn't actually know what to do with this one because he's never encountered it before. And in the black humored scene in the middle of this movie, they accidentally discover the way to kill the vampire, and it requires Kronos to have a new sword forged for him, which is pretty cool. Really good twists and turns in this movie, excellent sword fights, especially at the end of this movie. And some of the best damn acting out of Hammer is in this movie. While I said those are the 20 movies that were okay to piles of shit to me, the acting was subpar to me at best. Sometimes it was just hard to get through, and I found myself becoming bored with some of those movies. That's certainly not the case with this one. It wastes no time in getting to the point. The acting throughout this is really good. If something is done in this movie, it's done with purpose, which is awesome. There's some very hilarious test scenes, or different ways of turning the vampire genre on its head, dealing with this youth-draining vampire, of, how to sniff one out, which is pretty cool. The acting is really good. What's the biggest awesome thing about this movie is how much of an inspiration it was to a lot of the stuff that we are familiar with now. I'm probably going to guess that maybe Stephanie Meyer got the idea of the vampires walking in the sunlight from this, unless she had read Dracula and took that idea. The inspiration that Hideyuki Kikuchi got for not Blade, but Vampire Hunter D definitely comes from this movie. Go back and watch that anime from the 80s. Look at the way the characters are dressed in this movie. The dialogue, the fight sequences, very much inspiration for the world of D. Kronos himself is probably a heavily inspiration for D, just besides Clint Eastwood and a lot of the samurai films that Kikuchi saw when he was younger. You see a lot of D in this character and his inspiration. Look at Professor Gross and his, semi-amusing personality, and you see Left Hand right there. This movie is also a heavily inspired characterizations and fight sequences in Blade 1 and 2. And especially the relationship dynamic in between Kronos and Gross as his father figure is very much remnant of Whistler and Blade. This movie is awesome. You can find it on the cheap. Frankly, anything bad about this movie I cannot say. Go find it, go watch it. I definitely guarantee you would have a good time with it.